difficulties with sound or visuals, go ahead and reach out in the chat. And I have Kyle Brotherton with me, and he will be happy to help you with that if you're having some issues there. Everyone will be muted during the webinar. However, if you have any comments or questions, please put those in the chat. We will keep the comments and summarize those in the staff report when it goes forward to a public hearing and to City Council. And then questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. So we are here tonight to provide you some information on amendments that we're working on to the Community Development Code related to artificial turf. So I'm going to go over the general topics that we'll have that we're researching to create the regulations, the timeline and the process for the approval, and then we will go into any questions that people have. So keep in mind, we're still in the process of drafting these regulations, so they're likely to continue to change between now and when they're formally presented at a public hearing in October. So let's start with why we're drafting these regulations. So artificial turf has become more popular in recent years as an alternative to natural turf, commonly due to less maintenance and water usage. So currently the city's Community Development Code prohibits the use of artificial turf within the city. Any properties that currently have artificial turf were done so illegally. So city staff did begin a code enforcement process, a code compliance process on several properties that had illegally installed the turf, and concerns were raised to city council about why it wasn't permitted. So at that point, City Council requested staff to give a presentation on some background information about why turf was not currently permitted in the city. And there was an opportunity also for residents and we had at least one artificial turf installer present information about the benefits of artificial turf. So as a result of that meeting, City Council did ask staff to draft regulations that would allow the use of artificial turf in the city. So what we have done is draft an ordinance that, if approved, would create the best possible regulations to allow the use of artificial turf in the city of Clearwater. So let's get into the amendments. The amendments will allow the use of artificial turf citywide. We've drafted a new code section that's going to address several standards, including the location, design standards, permitting and inspections, installation, and maintenance. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information on each one of those topics. So for location, we're looking at where artificial turf would and would not be allowed to be installed on a property. So artificial turf would be permitted in all yards, on rooftops, and on top of existing concrete patios. There are several places where turf would either not be permitted or would need prior approval. So places where it's prohibited would be any of our required perimeter or vegetated buffers. It also would not be allowed on any parking surfaces, including our parking islands and grass parking areas. And then artificial turf is not allowed in city-owned right-of-ways or drainage features unless it's otherwise approved by the city engineer. So design standards, those are going to be the specific type of artificial turf that we want to see installed. This is going to include a minimum height of the blades of grass, and that's called the pile height, as well as the overall weight of the artificial turf per square yard, which is referred to as the face weight. We're also going to regulate the color of the turf, which is going to be required to be green, lifelike blades, except for parks and recreation facilities and athletic fields, they would be able to use other colors. We're going to ask for a minimum of an 8-year manufacturer's warranty and that all turf must be lead and PFAS free. So for permitting, we are going to permit this through a building permit process that will be reviewed by various city departments with minimal inspections. So a permit may be issued to a general contractor, an artificial turf installer, or a homeowner. Just note that if the artificial turf for it to be considered permeable, it must be installed by a general contractor or an artificial turf installer. If a homeowner desires to install it themselves, the areas covered by artificial turf will be considered impervious and will count towards the property's impervious surface ratio, or ISR. And we'll cover that in more detail on the installation. So as part of the building permit, a landscape plan or a survey has to be submitted that's going to show us the property, any trees on the property, and any areas that are proposed for artificial turf. And the property's impervious surface ratio should also be noted on that. So if artificial turf is proposed within the critical root zone of any tree on the property or a tree that overhangs the property, we're going to require a tree preservation plan. couple other things we'll require is a scale detail or a cross-section of the installation, similar to the one that you see on the screen. The manufacturer specifications, including their installation instructions, and of course the warranty will also be needed. So after the installation is complete, a final inspection is going to be required. So the contractor or installer will be required to submit information verifying the sub-base materials they used, as well as signing a verification form stating that they installed it per the manufacturer specifications and that it meets our code's definition of permeable. And that's for it to be considered permeable and not impervious. So you'll also have to submit photos of the subbase and leveling layers prior to them being covered up. That's really important that we need to make sure those pictures are taken before they're covered up. We're trying to alleviate an inspection in the middle of the process that will cause the installation to take longer. So we're going to accept photos, but we need to have that done prior to it being covered up. And then we'll also want to have photos of the final product when it's finished in the area. We are going to exempt some small areas of 50 square feet or less from getting a permit, but it will count towards the property's impervious surface ratio, and you'll be limited to one of those on a property. So installation. If a property owner chooses to hire a general contractor or artificial turf installer, that's the only way that it can be considered permeable. And so the property owner can choose to install it themselves, but it will be counted as impervious and count towards the property's ISR. So for the property to be considered permeable, the contractor or the installer has to meet some standards. And I'll go over those briefly. The artificial turf has to have a backing that has dual flow or hole punch to allow for drainage. Drainage is going to be really important. So if you're going to use a weed barrier, it has to be unwoven material because also we want to make sure we have drainage. There's a leveling layer on top that has to be of decomposed granite or limestone on top of the subbase. And then you have a subbase layer of clean stone that meets DOT standards and is required to be 3/4 to 1 inch in size. We want unwoven filter fabric on the bottom and sides of the subbase layer, and the underlying soils cannot be compacted. So all artificial turfs required to be installed per the manufacturer's specifications, and that'll be submitted with the building permit. And that's also going to tell us if infill material is required or recommended for the type of turf that's selected. The infill must be a clean silica sand or sand-based infill product. We're not going to allow plastic or rubber pellets for anything other than a park and rec facility or athletic fields. They commonly use the rubber materials to allow for to soften the fall or things like that for athletics. Seams have to be nailed or glued. They can't be sewn, and the edges have to meet up. The final installation has to be visually smooth with a grain in one direction. And again, our drainage is very important. So we want to make sure that we're not putting something that's going to impact adjacent lots or the right of way, and then it's going to follow the historic flow of the water in the area. Any artificial turf that's adjacent to living plant materials has to have a barrier, kind of like a bender board between it to try and keep the live materials from getting into the turf. If artificial turf is next to a seawall, it has to be pinned or staked behind it. It cannot be attached to the seawall or over the cap. And lastly, maintenance. We want to make sure your turf lasts as long as possible. And so maintaining it is going to ensure the quality of the product is sustained, and proper maintenance is going to keep the fibers upright. It's going to protect against damage. But if the turf does fall into disrepair, we are going to need it to be repaired or replaced, and you have to do it with the same or similar product, and that will, again, require a permit. So that was a lot on artificial turf, and I know that's what we're really here for, but there are a couple other things in this ordinance that I wanted to make sure I briefly touched on. We're looking at how to regulate non-living landscape materials, kind of like shell, rock, or stone. So some of our non-living landscape materials can be problematic when they're washed away and they end up in the city's stormwater system. So we're proposing to limit the use of these as a minor element to your landscape on the property that's supposed to be integrated. So the photo on the slide is an example of what would currently not be permitted and what we would not want to see. We want it to be a small area on the property. And so in addition, if we have non-living landscape materials, should not be installed on our city-owned rights of way under the drip line of any tree. And it can only be a small area on the property. And so the picture on this slide is a good example of what we're looking for. You can see that they've got a mulch there that's integrated into the landscape beds. And that's really what we want to see for any type of rock or stone material that's being used as well. And the last thing is the use of shell. We are going to limit that to walkways in the rear and side yards of residential properties. We don't want to see shell being used in the front because it's likely to get washed into our storm system. A couple other topics that are addressed in the ordinance is the creation of a new regulation that's going to require new residential construction in residential zones to provide 25% of their gross land area in the front yard as a landscaped area that has living plant material on it. So that would be a new thing for just new residential construction in new residential zones at this point. We are providing clarification on organic mulch similar to our non-living landscape material. We want to see that as more of a minor part of your landscaping, except for use under the drip line of trees. We would like to see organic mulches under the drip lines of trees. And then lastly, clarification is being added in several places that artificial turf can't be used as a parking surface. So there's a few items that we're still discussing at this point, because like I said, the ordinance has not been finalized. We're still continuing to make changes to it. And one of those is how we deal with properties that don't meet regulations right now. People that have already installed artificial turf illegally or have non-living landscape materials in areas that would not be allowed. So we're considering allowing these nonconformities to remain for a period of time and then require compliance with the new regulations. But again, we haven't figured out all the details of that. We're still discussing that with legal on how we would handle that. We will have some new and updated definitions, but until the ordinance is more finalized, we're not sure where we would be with those definitions. Some of the design standards and installation standards we're still discussing to make sure that we have clear direction and that we're getting what we need for each of the departments that are going to be reviewing this permit. And then also we're still working through the permitting process to make sure we make the process as quick as possible to get people through their permit, but also make sure that we're getting everything necessary for our staff to be able to review the permit. So that concludes the amendments, but keep in mind again, there could be changes between now and the public hearing. And so we're going to take a look at the next steps. And so there will be several upcoming meeting dates where you'll have the opportunity to make comment. All of these meetings are open to the public to come and make comments. So you're welcome to attend those. Also, this presentation is available online right now. The packet for the Environmental Advisory Board, which is next week on September the 18th, their packet has this presentation available in it if anybody would like a copy of the presentation. From the Environmental Advisory Boards, a comment from this session as well as the session tomorrow and from the Environmental Advisory Board will be taken and included within my staff report as it moves forward through the process. The Community Development Board will be the first step in the public hearing. It will be October the 15th. The Community Development Board will make a recommendation to the City Council, and City Council's first reading is scheduled for November the 7th. And the second and adoption of it is scheduled for November the 21st. So I have my email up there. If you have questions after the webinar is complete and you think of something after the fact that you didn't get a chance to put into the comment section, by all means, drop me an email. I am going to take the slides down now. So if you, I'll type my email into the comments as well, so you'll have it there. But we're going to go into the questions part of it, and Kyle is going to moderate for us and let me know what questions have come in, and I will respond to them to the best of my ability. Any comments that have been made in the comment section will be kept for the record and will be included in the summary that I have in the staff report that goes forward. So if you have any comments, by all means, put those in there as well. And so let's take this down. And so at this point, if you have any, you have to allow me to share video. Where are you, Kyle? right, go ahead, Kyle.
Still can't get on video, but I also have not seen any questions come through the chat. Oh, there we go.
Nope, we got a question and answer box. Can we get a copy to rewatch? Yes,
Oh,
it will be posted on the city's YouTube page. For anyone to rewatch the webinar. The actual draft of regulations have been posted on the city's website there was a notification about this event for tonight and tomorrow night. So the current draft of the ordinance is available if you'd like to get a copy of that. The presentation is available under the Environmental Advisory Board's packet for next week. I know it's a lot of information, and people are more concerned probably with why we were doing it, and we covered that early on. Are we getting some questions, Kyle?
we are. We have a couple more that just came in. One from the Michael X. What city department will be responsible for review of application, inspection, etc.?
It will be a building permit that will be submitted to planning and development, but it will include other departments, like our engineering and public works department will look at it to make sure specifically for stormwater things, but we will have land resources involved from the planning and development portion of it.
We have another one from Kathleen Beckman. Can you please explain how numerous homes on island estates were allowed to install artificial turf in front yards without the city knowing? Have they been assessed any fines?
I'm not certain how those were permitted. I know that we have a running list of where turf has been installed at this point, so we can monitor that. And then we initially did start the code compliance, and I think that's what's started this process. But to my knowledge, we have not issued fines at this point. It was put on hold by City Council until we were able to get them some more information and let them decide on how we want to move forward, whether to allow the turf or in some shape or form.
And then Gina said she can answer that a little bit more too if you'd like.
Let me unmute Gina. Where are you, Gina? There she is.
Am I unmuted?
Yep. Nope, you are not muted. You can talk.
Okay, no, I think you really covered it, Jamie. When this was before city council, I think there was a feeling that council didn't know exactly how they wanted to handle those, so they told us not to do enforcement. The city council that was seated at the time directed us not to pursue enforcement until this issue got resolved. So those cases are in abeyance until this ordinance is adopted, if it's adopted.
Right. And then another question from Kathleen. Has the city council been educated on the detrimental environmental impacts of artificial turf? And if so, by whom?
As part of the city staff presentation that was given, I believe, in December of 2023, there was information shared about why it's not permitted in our current code and some of the environmental impacts that could potentially occur with the installation of artificial turf.
Okay, another question from Annette. The yards that have used rock or stone mixed with landscaping, what are their options? These yards are small but have no grass.
Um, we really want to try to focus to not have entire yards being a mulch or a rock or stones. We want to make sure there's living landscape there. And we are happy to work with our sustainability folks to help you figure out what kind of plants can grow in the type of soil that you have. We'll have some Florida native plants that are more native to the area that won't need as much water and could grow in the type of soils that we have that will help people be able to sustain those if they have trouble growing grass as well. There can be alternatives to putting down rock or mulch.
This one comes from an anonymous attendee. This is a question about tomorrow's presentation, but is there going to be anything different tomorrow than we've presented today?
No, there will not. It's just an opportunity for people to come in person, or if they couldn't make it tonight, we wanted to give you both options.
Another one from Kathleen. How can $40,000 worth of artificial turf be installed in the city not know?
I will defer to Gina if she wants to respond to that. I'm not, code compliance is out there doing the best that they can when they see things, and they can't be everywhere all at once. And they started the code compliance process when it was brought to the attention, and they wanted to move forward with it.
I mean, I think that construction gets done all the time in the city, and we see it sometimes, and sometimes we don't see it. We cover a lot of ground, 25 square miles, and we're not down every single street all the time. So, unfortunately, there was someone out there selling turf to everyone, and no one saw that it was being done. And it's not the outcome that we would want, but it is where we are. It takes, I think, maybe a couple of days to do it, and people are in and out with the installation pretty quickly.
Another one from an anonymous attendee. Why is Island Estates being, in quotes, picked on as the only, quotes, violators?
I wouldn't say they were picked on. I said that that's the neighborhood that it was most visible. When code compliance did their sweep, they were the ones that were most noticeable. And I can tell you that of the notifications that we have, I think there was 45 that we know of citywide, and of that, 33 of those were on the beach and island estate. So that's where you're predominantly finding that artificial turf exists right now.
All right, two-parter here from Kathleen. What is the rationale for allowing all artificial turf but not all rock? Rock is certainly more permeable and natural. And then the second part of that is, what is the expected workload impact to code compliance by adopting this ordinance?
Um, Artificial turf is more of a grass-like product that is, from what I understand from the installer, you have to do it in a certain amount of material. It's not gonna, you can't do 100 square feet. And a lot of installers have told me that you have to have a minimum of 400 square feet to 600 square feet done for them to come out and do the product. So artificial turf by its general nature is a larger scale thing that is put out there into the yards. And it can be just as permeable as rock when it comes down to it. But when it comes to the rock, the more of concern with the rock is the mobility of the rock and it ending up in our stormwater system and that causing a problem that could lead to potentially more flooding. And so that's kind of what we're trying to alleviate by limiting the amount of rock that's used in the front yards. Expected workload impact to code compliance. With any ordinance change, there will be a heavy education process done. We'll probably put door hangers out for people and create pamphlets and do educational webinars to let them know what is and is not permitted. And we will do the best we can to track where artificial turf has been installed, and same with the rock and shell. And it's just a matter of trying to track those things just like anything else. So yeah, it is going to add to the workload, but we're doing the best we can to keep it organized to where it doesn't create an inordinate amount of work to the code compliance officers.
Right, we had one come in from Candice Colucci. I apologize if I get that wrong. She has her hand raised and she was wondering if she could ask questions orally or if they need to be typed in.
Typically in our webinars, we ask that you type them in and we don't unmute anyone.
Okay, and then we have another one from Michael X. Can we receive a map which shows where artificial turf has been installed?
We can look into that and see if we can create something to share.
All right, another couple from Kathleen. First one, is this ordinance fully supported by planning and our sustainability director? And then the second part of that is, to the best of your knowledge, do any environmental groups support the use of artificial turf in our region?
As for the ordinance, It's not a matter of whether staff supports it or not. City Council directed us to draft this ordinance, and so it's based on our planning expertise that we go out and do the research and find the best regulations that we can that would permit the turf to be installed should City Council decide to allow it. As for the environmental groups, that's not something that we've gotten into. I know that there are several groups out there who have expressed concerns about it, and I know the Environmental Advisory Board has expressed concerns about it. And I would encourage you to attend the City Council meetings to share those concerns.
This one's not a question, but Christine Abbate just said thank you for opening discussion. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Candace, if you didn't want to type your question in, by all means, feel free to reach out to me by email. We can tag base on the phone and have a conversation if you're looking for that. Otherwise, just go ahead and type it in.
Yeah, so she just asked as you were speaking. To clarify, did you state that there would be requirement of warranty and maintenance on the turf?
Yes, we are requiring a minimum of an 8-year warranty, and there is a full maintenance section that requires the certain types of maintenance to be done to be free of debris, to make sure there's no tears or lumps in it, or fading, things like that. If we find those type of things, you will be required to repair and or replace whichever is needed.
And then another one, part two, I may have missed it, but what will the procedure be for homes with existing turf?
We're still working through that with our legal department, but I think we are going to consider them legal nonconformities and allow them to stay for a period of time, at which point we would then require that they come into compliance. And that may mean that if somebody has artificial turf under their tree, they just take it out from underneath their tree and the turf can stay where it is. Other than that, it's just we're going to look at the areas where it would not be allowed. We're not going to require someone to rip their entire yard out if this were permitted. We will look at the areas, what is non-conforming to the current regulations and how can we fix that. So that's what we will look at for the people who have existing turf.
Question from anonymous attendee. Why is the sound not included in environmental issue? And that is in quotes.
Why is the sound not included in environmental issue? I'm not sure I understand the question. Yeah, if you can clarify that, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, so it's quite possibly the sound, amphitheater, Coachman Park.
Mm-hmm. The city does have a handful of areas where we use artificial turf. The sound is one of them, as well as a couple of our parks and playgrounds. Mostly our athletic fields have some turf down in them. And yes, Gina clarified, the code does currently allow the use of artificial turf in parks and recreation and athletic fields.
And then not sure if everyone saw, but Michael X asked just how many attendees were in this chat, and we do have 20 attendees total, plus the 2 panelists. All right, another question from Candace. How would we go about the process if we have existing turf? Do we file for something? Is there an inspection? And then regarding the warranty, would you require evidence of a maintenance plan for 8 years and then what? For the life of the turf, question mark.
What we're looking at for people with existing turf is just proof that it was installed prior to the adoption of the ordinance. And then if we say it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, we will say, okay, the ordinance is adopted November 21st of 2024. So if we say 10 years, you have until November 21st of 2034 to keep the turf as it is. And then we would work towards compliance when we got close to that date. For the warranty, The warranty is just the manufacturer's warranty that the artificial turf company provides, and it can be anywhere from probably 8 to 10 years up to 15-year warranty that they have on the products. But we're just asking for a minimum of an 8-year warranty, and that's something that you would submit as part of a new turf. The existing turf does not have to submit their warranty. For maintenance, there's not a requirement of a maintenance plan. We just are going to ask in the provide in the code recommendations of things that should be done to maintain the turf to extend the life of the turf to make sure that it's staying not fading, that it's not tearing, that it's not bubbling up and causing trip hazards, things like that. So those things will be required in there. And yes, as long as you have turf, we will ask that you maintain it.
All right, another question from Anonymous. So being in the code, meaning the city, how are they not creating any environmental issues that Kathleen has inquired and is opposing? And I'm going to assume that this refers back to Coachman Park and the Baker Sound.
Um, there are always pros and cons to anything that comes with a code, and artificial turf does have its pros and cons, and there are some environmental impacts that can occur with artificial turf. But with that being said, there are some uses, like with athletic fields, that have become very common practice in order to conserve water, in order to allow people to play games more often because rain tends to turn fields to mud and then it's unsafe for the kids to play. And so things like that. Turf gives a longer purpose for the athletic fields as well as they can create a softer surface under like playgrounds. So if somebody falls off the jungle gyms, the artificial turf can have a shock pad as well as some rubber pellets in there to cushion the fall, whereas a natural grass would not. So those are kind of some of the benefits of why the city has used them in certain instances.
All right. So to clarify, this comes from Candace. Do you want at least an 8-year product warranty from the turf manufacturer that comes with the product, not like a paid additional warranty that some vendors offer?
Yes, you are correct. This should be the actual manufacturer warranty that comes when you purchase the product. All right, any other questions? By all means, if you think of something afterwards, let me type my email in the chat so everybody's got it.
And we just had one more pop in as you're typing in your email. Comes from Anonymous. Does that mean there were no environmental concerns when deciding to allow for the city?
I cannot say whether there were environmental concerns. I was not involved in the decision making of that. But it was something that was decided for the mostly our Parks and Rec department is the one using and installing those. And it's something that they weighed the benefit of it and the safety of it versus and then the cost of it versus having something natural that would be more burdensome to maintain and in most cases more costly to maintain. So I think they were looking at more of a cost benefit analysis than they were looking at the environmental concerns. But I cannot say as to whether they were looking at those when they installed those because I was not involved in that decision.
This came in from Councilmember Cotton. No question, but he just said he appreciates us for staying late and answering these questions for the public and wishes us to have a great night.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for attending.
And then this is more of a follow-up to your answer, but Anonymous said all the above are reasons residents want it as well. And then Candace has another, if this passes, we will then be notified on what the clerical process of approval to be grandfathered in with existing owners. Will we need to file a permit still?
No, we have a running list of addresses, and we will follow up with a letter letting you know this has been adopted. This is the process where we're putting into place for existing artificial turf. And it won't be a permit. It'll probably just be we'll be asking you to provide proof that you purchased and installed your turf prior to the adoption of the ordinance. So just like an invoice from the installer would suffice.
Uh, Just another couple kudos, one from City Manager Poirier and then another one from Candace. Another question came in from Anonymous. What is the issue with organic mulch? Is it considered non-permeable? I'm going to try and pronounce that Malayuca mulch.
No, I mean it's not there's not necessarily an issue with organic mulch. We just don't want to see it used in the entirety of the front yard because again, it floats, it gets into our stormwater system, and it causes issues. So we're all for using organic mulch under your trees, under the tree canopies to provide a ground cover there where sometimes things won't grow. We're all for having mulch in your landscape beds that are integrated into the landscape bed. What we don't want to see is a whole yard covered in mulch. That's what we're trying to limit because we don't want to see that stuff getting washed away in a rainstorm or something else that we have going on to cause a more of a problem for our stormwater system.
And Kathleen also thanks us for our thoughtful responses. Mostly you, Jamie. And any other questions?
If not, thank you everyone for coming. I mean, again, I will be in person tomorrow night at the Countryside Library at 6 p.m. It will be the same brief presentation, but I will be there in person to answer any questions. If you think of anything else, again, you have my email address, so feel free to reach out with any questions or comments that you have, and we'll definitely still keep making some changes to the ordinance as we see there are some better opportunities for the regulations. And then we will be at the Environment Advisory Board next week on the 18th at 4 p.m. at the main library. Is there any more questions? Nope.
Nope.
All right. So thank you everyone for attending and have a good night.